So the last letter is a zombie apocalypse. The apocalypse hasn't quite taken hold. It's probably a month or 6 weeks. I can't remember the exact time frame.
Yeah, it's starting.
It's starting, and there are the two main characters, Laura and Morrigan, and they're both trapped in their homes. It was seemed like the safest decision to make. They had hordes of zombies that kind of ebb and flow on their block and in their neighborhood. And Laura, early on, her home becomes overwhelmed, so she has to hide in the attic. And then Morrigan just decided to kind of hole up. I think it was a decision that was kind of made with the help of one of the other main characters. His name is Jacob, who uses an ATV to do some runs throughout the neighborhood. He ultimately is the carrier or the courier. Is that he
Courier,
carries?
yeah.
Courier. Sorry, I don't use that word very often. He carries letters back and forth. That's basically what they decided to do to communicate with one another, Morgan and Laura. And the whole story is told through their letters, basically going back and forth. Hey, it's Writers Row, where we talk about the writing community on Twitter. We talk about the creative side of writing and the business side of writing. I am one of your hosts, DC Wright-Hammer, the author of the Between Two Minds series, sci-fi thriller. And I'm joined, as always, by the other host.
David, you just kept dragging it out. I was like, okay, is he going to stop? David Gane, the co-author of the Shepherd and Wolf mystery series, YA series about two teenage boys who chase serial killers.
Thank you, David. And hey, you got through it pretty well this time.
Yeah, you were just waiting for a moment for me to screw it up, and then when it never happened, you were just shocked.
It was very shocking. Our viewers very shocked right now, which is a perfect time for them to hit the thumbs up button on this video if they like the content we've been putting out, and subscribe if they have not subscribed. So make sure to do that. Helps out the channel, allows us to do more content and things like that. So we do appreciate it. What are we talking about tonight, David?
I should have asked you that question.
I flipped it on you.
I know you did. So we early on were asked to do a paid advertisement for The Last Letter, which was written by W.B. Welch and Tory Hunter. And I think you have a copy of it somewhere, don't you? Yeah, there we go. I was hoping you did.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we did one, but we didn't do the other one. And then kind of, I don't know, it's been about a week. We both have read it, and we've been talking about it, thinking that it'd be nice to just turn it into a review at the start of a show. And now we're just going to do an entire show on the book, right?
Yep. Yeah, so I don't know. I kind of felt compelled. It's a genre I don't read very much, which we'll talk about.
Okay.
And it's written in a way that I thought was very compelling to discuss. So figured we'd dig in. We're going to try to keep it relatively spoiler-free, but offer some insight on what we thought about the book, the story, the writing, things like that. And then ultimately kind of mention, how much we liked it at the end. So we'll give our honest opinion. Sure, it's we made
the finale already.
Yeah, but people have to actually wait or click to the end of the video to find out what we think. So, and then they'll miss all the good stuff.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious now. You don't read horror, or you don't read zombie fiction?
So I don't have anything against horror. It's just never really made it onto my to-be-read list. I have read the Mr. Mercedes series by Stephen King. Some people say that's soft horror. They don't say that's definitely not his more graphic and in-depth and gory stuff that he does. It's dark, but not very horror-centric. It's more of a crime sort of series that he kind of puts some supernatural elements in midway, and especially in the last book. But no, I definitely haven't. This is the first zombie novella or story that I've read of any serious length. I have watched a ton of movies and TV shows about zombies, but no, it was really neat to be able to actually dig in and see how that the TV and movies, how they build suspense and how they carry out sort of the formula that is the zombie genre, and see how that comes out in the written word. So,
And I think it's interesting because of course, have read a lot of horror. Um, of course, I don't know why I said it that way.
right.
And I also read World War Z.
Okay.
Which way do you guys go? Z, Z? I can't ever remember.
Where's Z's?
Okay, where's
that is always interesting to me. I don't get out much.
Another moment of difference between our countries. And the other thought that I kind of had when I was thinking about this one and World War Z, just that way, is that they're both epistolary novels. So epistolary is anything that is formed out of a series of letters. It doesn't even have to be letters, because nowadays it can be, it also can be news articles. It can be diary entries. It can be like texting or emails or whatever. So it's a form that's been around for a very long time.
Sure.
I think it's not like the earliest one, but an old one that comes to mind is Dracula, actually, where it's formed like that. So I thought it was kind of interesting, that kind of connection between World War Z, because it's formed out of a series of like short vignettes that are either like news articles or whatever. I think he kind of does quite a few. And I think that's Max Brooks, if I'm not mistaken, just for clarity. So I thought that was kind of interesting in my head as I was kind of reading through this as well.
Yeah, so we should probably give people the premise and then kind of clue them in as to what we're talking about. It's kind of important. So the last letter is a zombie apocalypse. The apocalypse hasn't quite taken hold. It's probably a month or 6 weeks. I can't remember the exact time frame.
Yeah, it's starting.
It's starting, and there are the two main characters, Laura and Morrigan, and they're both trapped in their homes. It was seemed like the safest decision to make. They had hordes of zombies that kind of ebb and flow on their block and in their neighborhood. And Laura, early on, her home becomes overwhelmed, so she has to hide in the attic. And then Morrigan just decided to kind of hole up. I think it was a decision that was kind of made with the help of one of the other main characters. His name is Jacob, who uses an ATV to do some runs throughout the neighborhood. He ultimately is the carrier or the courier. He carries, courier. Sorry, I don't use that word very often. He carries letters back and forth. That's basically what they decided to do to communicate with one another, Morgan and Laura. And the whole story is told through their letters, basically going back and forth. And so we get a glimpse into what Laura is seeing as she writes her piece. We get a glimpse into what Morgan is seeing with hers. And there's a disconnect in between because we're simply given these letters. That's the only way the story is told. So giving you sort of the premise and how the story is told, you have a little more context. You have a cat in your lap, David.
I have a cat on my lap.
Was that planned, or did it just kind of, okay?
It just happened. And I was like, do I stop TC as he's talking?
No.
Let the cat get on my lap and roll with it.
Make a cameo.
Well, I was hoping he wouldn't do anything too major, so I'm trying to give them love. So that's the extra bonus feature on this.
Okay. For the cat lovers out there, got it.
There you go. Yes, that's a good description of it without giving too much away.
Right.
So,
so there's sort of a formula with zombie stories, right? You've got a lot of times it happens at the start of the outbreak, and this book definitely checks that box. You got confusion and uncertainty and not sure what's happening. So there's sort of that like unknownness of it. Is this really the apocalypse? I thought it was kind of refreshing. There was a couple moments where they actually acknowledged, they actually used the word zombie, which series like The Walking Dead, they called them walkers. They didn't call them zombies. So, that was really cool for its time, not calling them zombies, calling them walkers or the dead or whatever. But I thought it was nice. They're like, oh, they're like they're literally zombies. Like, that was refreshing. It checks that. So it sort of checks that box. You either do or don't call them zombies. You've got the relationships that are there to begin with. And then I think one of the elements that's always present in zombie horror is, the zombies are bad and evil. Obviously, they're sort of the omnipotent, like they're all around there. They have all the control. And so that makes relationships fray. That makes things change. And the ultimate, like, humans are the real enemy in a zombie apocalypse eventually comes out, right? I mean, that's sort of part of the formula. And I think that it checks that box for sure. As things go on and the story changes and evolves, you get that paranoia, you get that distrust, you get the I don't know who is doing what when. And I think where it goes away from the formula and sets itself apart to some extent is that letter writing, and it's called the last letter, like the letter Z or Z. Is the human aspect of writing a letter. Like, it's very personal, it's very tangential. Like, you kind of go off on this thought of what I am thinking while I'm writing. And so there's times where, some of the letters might seem, if you're just reading, you're like, oh, why did she talk about that? Well, that's what you do when you're writing in letters. You kind of talk about my grandma, or you talk about this random thing over here. And I thought that was great, because for a moment I am reading a letter and I forget that they're in this situation just for a moment, for a sentence or a paragraph. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting some backstory, and it's adding a human element to it. And it feels very genuine. It feels very authentic. And so I really appreciated that aspect of it.
So, and the one thought that I always had that I was kind of curious as I was reading was how the process of writing the letters back and forth would play out. Because two things, when you're sharing a moment that's happened in the past, whether it's like a violent moment or I guess what I was thinking about is like jump scares or like creepy moments and stuff like that. How do you play it? Oh, now your cat's coming to visit my cat.
Hey, she's a big zombie fan, apparently. So,
so it's hard to when you're writing it in the past tense in the letter. It's hard to really share that kind of sense of like the surprise or the shock or anything like that. So then what I was finding that was interesting was it was more about the reflection of the event afterwards, right? The long-lasting effect. So, there's a bit of description of violent acts, but coming from WB's previous short stories, it doesn't take you as horrific, I guess.
Yeah.
One. So.
Well, I think you have. So, you and I both write. We like mystery. We like writing. We like to have maybe the narrative give you false information to make you think one thing, and so if you go in expecting sort of like heavy mystery or something like that, it's really not the book that if
No,
that's what you're looking for.
it's absolutely
Because
about the relationship.
exactly, it's about the letters specifically, and even someone can't write a letter if they're not alive and well enough to write a letter. So automatically, when you start reading the next letter, the person is there to write it. So there's no mystery in that sense.
Yes.
But that's, astute readers are going to pick that up. Like, oh, if I'm reading this, I know, like, I can think ahead and I can guess that this person, is at least alive enough to write this letter and deliver it. And so I think, yeah, there's some limitations with storytelling like that, but to have a sort of gem that takes that, I guess, the difficulties that go along with that, and just kind of they just kind of steamrolled through it. I think they have the letters. I think there's 14 of them, and they progress perfectly. Like, they progress in a way that is very well paced, that very much plays on one another, and still feels authentic, still feels like they're real letters. And even in the one where they're describing more active things that happen, more action, by the time you get to that point, you are looking for more of the payoff. You're looking for the story to sort of, arc, and you get that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was done well enough to suspend disbelief, be in a letter, be in the story, and move along. Like, if you are, if you're like some literary, you're trying to pick every little piece apart, you're going to find issues in just about every story you read. I think this one was ambitious, and I thought it did it well.
Yeah. I was I got totally distracted because one of the things that adds to it is the delivery of those letters, because there's you said it's not just the letter getting written, it's also the letter gets delivered, right? How does the letter get there and everything like that, especially if bad things start happening, then it's like it's not just about the relationship, it's how do they continue to communicate, and how do you communicate in these kind of situations, because of course electricity's gone, and so the internet's gone, and cell phone towers are gone early on, and everything like that. So that's kind of where it is. And I thought that was interesting as well, just because it builds its own kind of, I don't know if suspense is the right word, but you're kind of curious as how does that continue working until they can hopefully not have to do it by letters anymore, right? So
yeah, because it's I can't recall specifically in the book, but I don't know that they were they friends? It's not clear.
It's a little ambiguous,
right?
You can make your own connections, I think, and I think they've done that intentionally.
No, I agree. I think part of the space between them, so there's really two spaces that are very interesting. The space that confines each individual character, the home that they're trapped in, and how that changes for each of them as the story goes, and then the space between them. And so my mind kept going back and forth as the letters were being delivered, or as we were, kind of the serving back and forth of it. And I'm thinking about the space in between. They describe what they see out the window. The distance between them.
Neighborhood really well.
Exactly. And that distance felt really far away, but they were at least on the same block. We don't know exactly how far they were.
Yeah.
But it just felt like miles away, from the confinement of one home to the other, to the space between. And that just really added sort of a nice layer to the already, again, the genre. You've got to have these sort of meta experiences for the reader, or you're just giving them the right by numbers zombie horror that fills up a lot of the tropes. And people like that stuff. By all means, read it. I thought this set itself apart. This is sort of a gem. The way I describe it in the review that I left on Amazon is that the zombie horror genre is basically like post-apocalyptic zombie-filled world, and this is like finding a decent human being among all that. Like, so I kind of used the little analogy there.
I actually, I did want to actually come back to your point about that feeling of the spaces between the houses, because even the process of getting from one house to the next, it's dangerous. Or there's these moments where a character gets outside, and you enjoy those moments because actually there are in both ways. They're either tense because you're hoping they survive, or there's like hopefully a little escape and a peaceful moment, because once you've been stuck in a house for however long these now that I think back on it, were there dates? There weren't dates on these letters, right?
I don't think so. I could have made up.
So
There definitely wasn't dates on the letters specifically, but just how long they were there. Just from some of the context that they gave, it seemed like it'd been weeks or a month, but not a whole lot longer. The water was still on. That was sort of a thing that they had mentioned. So,
anyways, that kind of process of those spaces in between the houses and moving. If you try and move between the houses, you really feel the distance between just your next door neighbor, sort of thing, right?
Right. And the zombies in there I thought were realistic. Oftentimes you usually pick between sort of slow, really decomposing and unable to really move very fast, and then the super fast running, crazy, sort of rabid ones. And so, I thought that they were able to navigate that well and make it a little more realistic without giving up too many spoilers or anything like that.
Yeah.
I thought that they did the, one of the main characters, the zombie, if you want to call it that. I thought they did it justice. So.
Okay. And now I'm trying to figure out. Okay, the other question is, because I come from writing as with a co-writer, the one question we always have is, or the one statement, I couldn't even tell that it was written by two people.
Right.
In this one, I think, okay, I'm just pulling back on my belief of what might have been happening as we started filming this. You and I kind of spoke a few things. So the question is, have WB and Tory written separate characters? And if so, who do you think wrote what? And then this is probably more for WB and Tory.
Yeah.
But
no, I think it's fun. I think anybody who's read the book and is watching this far into this video is probably thinking, similarly. And who knows if we'll ever get it out of them. And obviously they edit each other's work, so there's a little bit of that. But I originally went in. What's that?
There's Morgan, who is the firefighter.
Yep.
And Laura, who is she's the one who hides in the attic to begin with.
Yep.
Right?
I originally went in.
She's not as much of a survivalist, we'll say.
Sure. No, I originally went in thinking Laura was written by Tory, and then the more I read, I feel like it flipped, and I'm not exactly sure why.
Okay. And I was originally thinking the same thing, where I was thinking WB was Morrigan, which is a tricky name now that I'm saying it over and over again, because it's Morrigan.
Right.
But now I'm starting to think that they wrote them both. That's my theory.
Well, if
But
you can,
because I know, because I remember WB and Tory on Twitter saying, like WB saying, I'm waiting for Tory to write her part.
right.
So then, yeah, I feel like they had to have written it separately. So I'm going to still stay with my original.
Okay.
WB's Morgan, and you stay with Tory as Morgan, and then we'll see if we can ever get them to answer it.
Okay. And again, like I said, they edited each other's work, so of course there's some blurring there, but mostly, like I said, I started off thinking that Laura was written by Tory, and so yeah, I'll flip that. That way we sort of have a little friendly wager um, as to who done it. That's the real mystery.
Yeah, and I like it if people who watch the video and who have watched or read the book, or you read the book because of it afterwards, and then you come back and give us your comment on who you think.
Comment down below.
Yeah, that would be good.
Who did Tory write and who did WB write? Yeah, I don't think we have a whole lot more to say. It's like I said, it's a gem. Quick read, like 2 hours.
Say well, I'm a slower reader than you, but it is.
Right.
It's a fast, tight book.
Yeah, 2.5, 3 hours. If you just sit down, you can plow through it. Or, really, if you want to break in between letters, that was effective too. If you're just looking for a quick, let me get my next letter in, that was fun and great. So, yeah, if you haven't seen it, I'm showing you again because I've got a physical copy, which is awesome.
I was not as lucky to get.
And pick it up and let us know what you think. If you've read it, who wrote what, and what did you think of the book? If you've had a chance to dig in.
Okay, you just gave me a last minute idea where a person, if you knew the times or like the time between the book or the letters, you could read it in real time. Be like, oh my gosh, what's happening with Laura?
Is that gonna really add?
It adds dimension to it.
Are you sure?
Absolutely, I'm staying with that. Okay, I think
and on that note, that will be the last word on the last letter.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Appreciate everybody watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye.